July 20th, 1969. Neil Armstrong's about to take that famous first step on the moon. The whole world's watching. Cameras rolling, history in the making. But what if that wasn't the whole story? What if, while everyone was focused on Armstrong's footprints, something else was happening up there? Something the cameras didn't show. Something NASA couldn't talk about. That's where Transformers: Dark of the Moon starts, and it's one hell of an opening move. Michael Bay's third entry in the Transformers franchise, released in 2011, does something most blockbuster sequels don't even attempt. It reaches back 50 years into real history, grabs one of humanity's proudest moments and says, "Yeah, that happened, but here's what you didn't know." It's audacious. It's completely absurd if you think about it for more than 2 seconds. And somehow, it works. The film opens with actual NASA footage. We're talking real archival material from the Apollo 11 mission, seamlessly blended with the movie's narrative. President Kennedy's voice echoes through the opening moments, talking about the space race, about beating the Soviets to the moon. Except in this version, there's another reason for that urgency. The Americans detected something. An alien spacecraft crashed on the lunar surface, and the entire space race, the billions of dollars, the lives risked, the national pride on the line, all of it was really about getting to that ship first. This isn't just clever framing. It's Bay and screenwriter Aaron Kruger recontextualizing an actual historical event to create instant stakes. The moon landing becomes a cover story, and suddenly we're in conspiracy thriller territory before a single Transformer has even appeared on screen. When Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin plant that American flag, they're not just claiming the moon for humanity. They're securing an alien crash site, photographing the wreckage, collecting samples from a vessel that's been dead and silent for who knows how long. But here's what makes this opening genuinely effective. It grounds the film in our reality before exploding it into something fantastic. For the first 5 minutes, Dark of the Moon doesn't feel like a Transformers movie. It feels like a Cold War thriller, like something you'd see in a serious historical drama. The government officials, the tension in mission control, the secrecy, it's all played straight. No jokes, no over-the-top action yet, just the creeping realization that everything we thought we knew about one of the 20th century's defining moments might have another layer to it. Then we cut to Cybertron, the Transformers' homeworld, and it's dying. Wars tearing it apart. We've seen glimpses of this in the previous films, but Dark of the Moon opens with a full-scale battle sequence set during the final days of Cybertron's fall. Autobots and Decepticons are fighting desperately, and in the middle of this chaos, a ship launches, the Ark. It's carrying something precious, some kind of technology that could end the war, turn the tide, save their dying world. But it doesn't make it. The ship's hit, badly damaged, and it goes careening off into space. Now we know what crashed on the moon. And whatever it's carrying, whatever technology was meant to save Cybertron, it's been dormant on Earth's moon for millions of years. This historical fact merged with science fiction gives Dark of the Moon something the previous 2 films struggled with. Wait. The first Transformers movie from 2007 was about a teenager and his first car. Revenge of the Fallen, despite trying to expand the mythology, ended up being a messy, overstuffed sequel that didn't know what it wanted to be. But Dark of the Moon comes out swinging with purpose. It's saying, this isn't just about robots fighting anymore. This is about history. This is about secrets that have been buried for decades. This is about the fact that the war between Autobots and Decepticons has been influencing human events longer than we realized. And that mission statement carries through the entire film. At 54 minutes, this is the longest Transformers movie up to this point, and Bay uses that runtime to tell a story that's more focused than its predecessor. There's still humor. This is a Michael Bay film after all, with all that entails. But the core narrative has a clarity that Revenge of the Fallen lacked. We've got a clear MacGuffin, the technology on the Ark, a clear villain motivation. The Decepticons want to use it to bring Cybertron to Earth, and a clear moral conflict. What happens when your mentor betrays everything you believe in? Because that's the real hook of Dark of the Moon. This isn't just another Decepticons attack, Autobots defend plot. The antagonist of this film is Sentinel Prime, Optimus's predecessor as leader of the Autobots, voiced with gravitas by Leonard Nimoy. When the Autobots recover the Ark from the moon and revive Sentinel, it seems like a massive win. Optimus has his mentor back. The Autobots gain a powerful warrior and tactical genius. Finally, they've got an advantage, except Sentinel's been working with Megatron all along. The technology he was carrying, the pillars that were meant to save Cybertron, they're actually a space bridge, a device that can teleport entire planets. Sentinel made a deal with the Decepticons long ago, deciding that the only way to save their dying world was to bring it to Earth, enslave humanity, and use our planet's resources to rebuild Cybertron. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. It's utilitarian philosophy taken to its darkest extreme, and it comes from the mouth of the character who's supposed to be the wise, noble leader. This betrayal storyline elevates Dark of the Moon beyond typical blockbuster fare. Suddenly we're dealing with themes of ideology versus loyalty, the moment when your hero realizes his mentor has become the villain, the gut-wrenching decision Optimus faces when he has to fight, and potentially kill, the Transformer he respects most in the universe. It's Shakespearean tragedy dropped into the middle of a movie about giant robots punching each other, and somehow Bay threads that needle. The emotional beats land even as buildings explode in the background. The human story centers on Sam Witwicky, played once again by Shia LaBeouf, though this time he's in a very different place. In the first film, he was a teenager trying to get a car and impress a girl. In Revenge of the Fallen, he was a college student thrust back into the war. Now, in Dark of the Moon, he's a college graduate who saved the world twice and can't get a job. It's actually a clever bit of character progression. Sam's dealing with the mundane reality of post-recession America, sending out resumes, getting rejected at interviews, living off his girlfriend's success. His new girlfriend, Carly, played by Rosie Huntington-Whiteley, replacing Megan Fox's Michaela, works for a wealthy businessman and moves in circles Sam can't quite access. This creates an interesting dynamic. Sam's a hero, but only a handful of people know it. He's got a medal from the president hidden in a box, but he can't put "defeated ancient Decepticon" on his LinkedIn profile, so he's adrift, trying to figure out who he is when he's not actively saving the world. It's a surprisingly relatable premise for a giant robot movie. The struggle to find purpose and identity after your big moment has passed. Of course, the Transformers themselves remain the core draw. Optimus Prime, voiced by Peter Cullen with that unmistakable baritone, continues to serve as the moral center of the franchise, but Dark of the Moon adds layers to his character. This isn't the optimistic leader from the first film. This is an Optimus who's been fighting a losing war for years on Earth, watching his Autobots die one by one, facing betrayal from someone he trusted completely. When Sentinel turns, you can feel Optimus breaking. Cullen sells the hell out of those moments, delivering lines like, "You were the one who taught me. Freedom is everyone's right," with a weight that transcends the absurdity of the premise. The Decepticons get more personality this time around too. Megatron, voiced by Hugo Weaving, is wounded and diminished after his defeat in Revenge of the Fallen. Half his face is missing, replaced by scavenged metal. He's weaker than he's ever been, which makes him desperate and even more dangerous. And we get new villains like Shockwave, a one-eyed logical extremist with a massive worm creature called a Driller, and Laserbeak, a Decepticon spy who can disguise himself as various forms of technology. But let's talk about what Dark of the Moon is really known for. The action. Michael Bay is many things as a director. Subtle isn't one of them, but the man knows how to construct an action sequence, and this film features some of the most elaborate, sustained action filmmaking of his career. The highway chase midway through, where Decepticons attack Sam and Carly on a busy freeway, is a masterclass in vehicular chaos. Cars flip, crash, explode, all shot with Bay's signature low-angle, sun-flare-filled style. It's kinetic and visceral in a way that puts you right in the middle of the mayhem. Then there's the Chicago battle. Oh man, the Chicago battle. The entire third act of Dark of the Moon is essentially one long, 45-minute action sequence as the Decepticons invade Chicago, activate the space bridge pillars, and begin pulling Cybertron through to Earth. Buildings crumble. The city becomes a war zone. Autobots and human military forces fight street by street against an overwhelming Decepticon army. It's apocalyptic scale filmmaking, and Bay holds nothing back. What makes this sequence work, beyond the obvious spectacle, is that it's broken into distinct beats. We've got the wingsuit sequence, where human soldiers in flying squirrel suits glide between Chicago skyscrapers while being shot at by Decepticons. We've got the building collapse moment, one of the film's most memorable images, where Sam and his team are inside a skyscraper that tips over, the entire structure slowly tipping until it slams into another building. We've got Optimus arriving with his flight tech, armor, and weapons, laying waste to Decepticons in a fury we haven't seen from him before. And we've got the final confrontation between Optimus and Sentinel, teacher versus student, fought among the ruins of a once great city. Bay shot Dark of the Moon specifically for 3D, and it shows. This was during the post-Avatar 3D boom when every blockbuster was being converted or shot in the format. But Bay actually used 3D cameras developed by James Cameron's team, the same technology used on Avatar. The result is depth and dimensionality that actually enhances the action rather than distracting from it. When debris flies toward the camera, when Transformers leap through space, when buildings collapse. The 3D gives it all an immersive quality that made the theatrical experience genuinely impressive. The film also benefits from being released at a specific moment in blockbuster history. This is 2011, before superhero movies completely dominated the conversation, before cinematic universes became the default mode of franchise filmmaking. Transformers: Dark of the Moon could be massive and bombastic without constantly setting up sequels or worrying about interconnected storytelling. It's a self-contained spectacle, a 3-act story with a beginning, middle, and end. Sure, the franchise continues after, but Dark of the Moon doesn't spend its runtime teasing what comes next. It's fully committed to the story it's telling in the moment. Steve Jablonsky's score deserves mention too. His music for the Transformers franchise has always been effective, but Dark of the Moon's soundtrack elevates key moments beautifully. The orchestral theme that plays during Optimus's big action beats, the ominous tones accompanying Sentinel's betrayal, the melancholy that underscores the destruction of Chicago. It's epic filmmaking music that knows exactly when to hit you emotionally and when to let the sound design take over. Because the sound design is crucial here. The Transformers themselves are audio marvels. Every transformation, that iconic mechanical whirring and clicking sound, was painstakingly crafted. The impacts when these massive beings collide have weight. You feel the heaviness of metal on metal. The Decepticon weapons have distinct audio signatures. It's a film where the sound mix is as important as the visuals, creating a complete sensory experience that's as much about what you hear as what you see. Dark of the Moon also marks a turning point for the franchise in terms of reception. The first Transformers was a surprise hit, a genuinely entertaining summer blockbuster that exceeded expectations. Revenge of the Fallen was critically panned, a mess of a movie that made a ton of money but left a sour taste. Dark of the Moon had something to prove. It needed to show that the franchise could deliver quality along with spectacle. And while critical response was still mixed, this is Michael Bay after all, and his style is divisive. There was a general sense that Dark of the Moon was a return to form, a Transformers movie that remembered how to balance its elements. The film grossed over $1.1 billion worldwide, making it one of the highest-grossing films of 2011. It demonstrated that audiences still had appetite for these characters, these stories, this brand of large-scale action filmmaking. More importantly, it proved that the franchise could evolve, could take risks with its storytelling, the historical conspiracy angle, the mentor betrayal, and still deliver what fans wanted: robots fighting with spectacular visual effects. So when we talk about Transformers: Dark of the Moon, we're talking about a film that's very specifically a Michael Bay joint, for better and worse. It's too long. Some of the humor doesn't land. The human characters occasionally feel like they're in a different movie than the Transformers. But it's also ambitious, visually stunning, emotionally surprisingly effective at key moments, and committed to delivering the most epic Transformers story that had been told up to that point. It's a film about betrayal and loyalty, about giant robots, but also about the humans caught in their war, about spectacle, but also about stakes. It rewrites history, destroys Chicago, introduces one of the franchise's most complex villains, and gives us some of the most memorable action sequences in 2010's blockbuster cinema. And it all starts with that moon landing, with the idea that when we took our first steps on another world, we weren't alone up there. We just didn't know it yet. 3 years have passed since the events in Egypt. The world knows Transformers exist now. There's no covering that up after a battle in the middle of a major city, and humanity's had to adjust. The Autobots are working with the U.S. government, operating as a sanctioned Black Ops unit called Nest-T, taking on global threats and hunting down remaining Decepticon cells. It's an uneasy alliance, but it's holding, for now. Sam Witwicky, meanwhile, is drowning in rejection emails. The film drops us into his Washington, D.C. apartment, where he's living with Carly Spencer, and immediately we see the disconnect. This is a guy who's been to war twice, seen things most people couldn't imagine, held the matrix of leadership in his hands. He's got a Medal of Freedom from the president, and he can't land an entry-level job. The interviews are brutal in their mundanity. Potential employers look at his resume: 2 years at community college, vague references to government work, and they see nothing special. Sam can't exactly tell them he saved the world. The parts of his life that matter most are classified. There's a great moment where he's at a job interview, and the interviewer asks what makes him special. Sam wants to scream about Decepticons and ancient alien wars, but instead he stammers through corporate speak about being a team player. It's almost painful to watch this young man who's been extraordinary in extraordinary circumstances trying to convince someone he'd be good at data entry. Carly represents everything Sam wants but feels he can't achieve. She worked for Dylan Gould, a wealthy car collector played by Patrick Dempsey, and she moves in circles of money and influence. Her job is glamorous. She's capable and confident. and Sam's wrestling with his own inadequacy, feeling like he's fallen behind while the world moved on. It's masculinity crisis stuff, sure, but LaBeouf plays it with enough genuine frustration that it reads as character development rather than just plot mechanics. While Sam's dealing with his quarter-life crisis, the Autobots are still fighting. We see them on a mission in the Middle East, infiltrating a Decepticon-controlled facility in what looks like an abandoned industrial site. It's classic NEST operation stuff. Human soldiers providing support while Autobots do the heavy lifting. Optimus Prime is there, along with Ironhide, Sideswipe, and others. They're hunting for intelligence about Decepticon activities. And they find something. Engine parts from the Ark. Decepticon technology that matches the ship the Autobots thought was lost forever during Cybertron's fall. This changes everything. If the Decepticons have been scavenging parts from the Ark, that means they know where it is. And if they know where it is, they've potentially been accessing whatever technology Sentinel Prime was transporting when the ship went down. Optimus brings this information to Charlotte Meering, the new Director of National Intelligence played by Frances McDormand. Meering's a hard-ass, no-nonsense bureaucrat who doesn't fully trust the Autobots despite their alliance. She's got that government paranoia, the kind where even your allies are potential threats that need managing. When Optimus tells her about the Ark, you can see her calculating, already thinking about what this means politically and strategically. But here's the kicker. Meering reveals that the U.S. government has known about the Ark for decades. Remember that opening sequence on the moon? Turns out that wasn't just a discovery, it was a cover-up. NASA's been sitting on this information since 1969. They recovered pieces from the crash site, photographed the ship, documented everything, and they never told the Autobots. This is the first real crack in the human-Autobot alliance. Optimus is furious, and rightfully so. His people have been fighting and dying on Earth, working alongside humans under the assumption they were partners. And all this time, the humans were keeping secrets about a Cybertronian ship containing technology and possibly survivors. The betrayal cuts deep. Optimus's line delivery here, "What else have you not told us?" carries weight because it's not just about the Ark, it's about trust fundamentally broken. Meering tries to justify it. Operational security, need-to-know basis, the usual government intelligence excuses. But she agrees to a joint mission. Humans and Autobots will return to the moon, extract whatever they can from the Ark, and hopefully recover the ship's technology before the Decepticons can use it. The lunar mission sequence is visually striking in a way that's very different from the typical Transformers action. There's an eerie quality to seeing Autobots moving across the moon's surface, the Earth hanging in the background, the silence of space punctuated only by radio chatter. When they breach the Ark and enter the crashed ship, it's almost archaeological. This vessel has been dead for millions of years, frozen in time, a tomb of Cybertronian history. And deep inside, they find him. Sentinel Prime, Optimus's predecessor, the last Prime before Optimus took the Matrix. He's offline, damaged, locked in stasis, but he's intact. The film takes a moment here that's important. Optimus approaching Sentinel's body, seeing his mentor for the first time in what must be eon. It's reverential. This isn't just a fellow Autobot. This is the leader Optimus served under, learned from, modeled himself after. They also find the pillars, hundreds of them, stored throughout the Ark. Cylindrical devices covered in Cybertronian glyphs, their purpose unclear. Optimus recognizes them as pieces of some larger technology, but without Sentinel to explain, they're just artifacts. Meanwhile, Sam's getting dragged back into the world he tried to leave behind. His introduction to this film's conspiracy comes through his new job, ironically. After countless rejections, he finally lands a position in the mailroom at a tech company. It's humiliating for someone with his history, but it's employment. On his first day, one of his co-workers, a twitchy, paranoid guy named Jerry Wang, played by Ken Jeong, corners him in the bathroom. Jerry knows who Sam is, knows about the Transformers, and he's terrified because he's discovered something at work, something involving the Decepticons. His company, along with several other major corporations and space programs, has been infiltrated. They're working on technology they don't understand, designs they didn't create, all being funneled through a network of human collaborators who don't even realize they're serving an alien agenda. This scene plays almost like a spy thriller. Jerry's frantic, shoving documents at Sam, whispering about Russian conspiracies and corporate espionage that's actually alien infiltration. It's played for comedy initially, Jeong's delivering lines at maximum anxiety, but there's real paranoia underneath. This is a man who's discovered something that's gotten him killed before he even knows it. Because Laserbeak is there, a Decepticon spy in the form of various small electronic devices, Laserbeak has been monitoring Jerry this whole time. The moment Jerry passes information to Sam, his fate is sealed. Laserbeak follows him, transforms, and executes him. It's sudden and brutal, a reminder that for all the bombast and humor, people actually die in these films when they cross the Decepticons. Sam takes the information to the Autobots, to Nest, trying to piece together what Jerry discovered. The documents mention space program collaborations, lists of companies, names of people in positions of power. It's conspiracy web stuff, connections that don't make sense until you realize there's a coordinating intelligence behind them. Back at Nest headquarters, something more momentous is happening. Using the Matrix of Leadership, the ancient artifact that confirmed Optimus as a Prime, Optimus attempts to revive Sentinel. Energy flow, lights flicker on, and then Sentinel Prime opens his optics, consciousness returning after millions of years of darkness. Leonard Nimoy's voice emerges, confused at first, then focusing. Optimus? The reunion is emotional in a way these films rarely are. Sentinel recognizes Optimus, proud that his student took the Matrix, carried on the Autobot cause. Optimus is almost reverent, speaking to his mentor with a deference we've never heard from him before. For a moment, it feels like a genuine victory. The Autobots have gained a powerful warrior, a tactical genius, someone who fought at the highest levels of the war for Cybertron. Sentinel brings knowledge too. He explains the pillars. They're components of a space bridge, technology that can create portals across vast distances, even transport entire planets. It's matter transference on a cosmic scale. On Cybertron, Sentinel was developing this technology as a way to save their dying world, to relocate it to a system where it could be restored. But the Decepticons attacked, the Ark was forced to launch before the mission was ready, and everything was lost, or so everyone thought. Now the pillars are recovered, the space bridge technology could be rebuilt, and in theory, the Autobots could use it to finally return to Cybertron, to see if anything of their world remains. It's hope, something they haven't had in a long time. Mirroring and the government officials are nervous about this technology. A device that can transport matter across space, that can theoretically move planets, that's weapon-level power, and they're not comfortable with it being in anyone's hands, even their allies. But Sentinel assures them the Autobots have no intention of using the space bridge as a weapon. They just want to go home. Or at least see what's left of home. Sentinel quickly establishes himself as a force. In a demonstration for the Nest team, he takes on Optimus in a sparring match, and he doesn't just hold his own, he dominates. Sentinel's fighting style is different from Optimus's, more brutal and efficient. He's got weapons we haven't seen before, cosmic rust cannons and a double-bladed energon sword. Watching him move, you understand why he was the Prime before Optimus. This is a warrior who fought on the front lines of Cybertron's darkest days. But there are moments, small things, where something feels off. Sentinel asks pointed questions about Earth's resources, about human population centers, about planetary defenses. He's interested in the pillars' exact locations, insisting they need to be moved to a secure site that he'll designate. And when Optimus expresses hesitation about using the space bridge technology too quickly, wanting to study it, understand the risks, Sentinel is almost dismissive. "We don't have time for caution, Optimus. Our war cannot be won without sacrifice." Sam, meanwhile, is getting deeper into the conspiracy Jerry uncovered. The names on those documents lead to some of the wealthiest, most powerful people on Earth. One of them is Dylan Gould, Carly's boss. Sam's suspicions grow when he visits Gould's car collection, a legitimately impressive array of vehicles, and recognizes some of the cars. They're too perfect, too advanced. These aren't just luxury vehicles. Some of them are Decepticons in disguise. Dylan plays it smooth when confronted. He's charming, dismissive of Sam's concerns, painting him as paranoid and jealous. It's a nice bit of misdirection because Patrick Dempsey's natural charisma makes you second-guess whether Sam's reading too much into things. Maybe these are just expensive cars. Maybe Sam's looking for conspiracies because he misses being important. But then, Sam connects the dots. Dylan's father was also wealthy, also connected, and his fortune came from salvaging Cybertronian technology decades ago after various Transformer incidents. The Goulds have been working with the Decepticons for at least a generation, profiting from alien technology while humanity remained ignorant. Dylan's not just a collaborator, he's a legacy agent, raised in this world of secrets and alien influence. The conspiracy expands. Aerospace companies have been integrating Cybertronian tech into satellites. Communications networks have backdoors built in. There are literally hundreds of pillars hidden around the world, not just the ones recovered from the Ark. The Decepticons have been playing a long game, positioning resources and technology for years, waiting for the right moment. And that moment is coming. Soundwave, the Decepticon communications expert, has been coordinating everything from the shadows. Laserbeak has been eliminating anyone who gets close to discovering the truth. Even the assassination that opens the film's Middle East sequence was part of this larger plan, keeping the humans distracted while the real operation advances. Sam brings everything to Nest, to Mirroring, to anyone who'll listen. But he's a civilian now, not a soldier. His warnings are noted but not acted on with urgency. The government's already dealing with the political nightmare of explaining why they hid the Ark's existence for 50 years. They're not ready to believe there's an even larger conspiracy at play. Sentinel, too, seems unconcerned when Optimus shares Sam's findings. Decepticons have always used deception. Optimus, it's in their name. But we have the pillars. We have the technology. Whatever plan they're forming, we've already won. It's confident, almost arrogant, and it should be reassuring. But there's something in the delivery, in the way Sentinel dismisses the threat, that feels wrong. Optimus isn't with him. He's dealing with the political fallout of the government's secret. Ironhide volunteers to escort Sentinel, bringing along a small team of Autobots. It's meant to be a routine security check. Sentinel walks into that facility, looks at the pillars, and then turns to Ironhide. We were gods once, all of us. But here, he doesn't finish the sentence. Instead, he draws his cosmic rust cannon and fires. Ironhide, loyal, gruff, one of Optimus's oldest friends, doesn't even have time to react. The cosmic rust spreads across his body, corroding his armor, destroying his systems from the inside. He falls, reaches out, manages one word, Sentinel, and then his optics go dark. The other Autobots try to fight, but Sentinel cuts through them with brutal efficiency. This isn't a battle, it's an execution. And when Decepticons arrive, not attacking Sentinel but joining him, the truth crashes down. Sentinel Prime isn't a rescued hero, he's the plan. He's been the plan all along. He takes the pillars and leaves. Just leaves, with Decepticon forces covering his exit, walking away from the bodies of Autobots who trusted him, who welcomed him, who never saw this coming. Optimus arrives too late. He sees Ironhide's body, sees the devastation, and the realization hits him like a physical blow. His mentor, the one who taught him everything, who gave him the Matrix, who he revered above all others, has betrayed them. Everything Sentinel said was a lie. And the Autobots have just handed their enemy exactly what he needed. The first act ends on that gut punch. No witty comeback, no immediate countermove. Just Optimus standing in the wreckage of his trust, holding the body of a friend, understanding that they've already lost before the war even began. The aftermath of Ironhide's death sends shockwaves through both the Autobot ranks and Nest Command. This wasn't a battle casualty. This was murder, plain and simple, committed by someone they'd invited into their home. Optimus is shattered in a way we've never seen him. Peter Cullen's vocal performance here strips away the usual commanding tone, leaving something rawer underneath. When Optimus says, "He was like a brother to me," you hear centuries of friendship evaporating in a single act of violence. But there's no time to mourn properly. Sentinel's taken the pillars and disappeared. Intelligence reports place him meeting with Decepticon forces in various locations around the globe. He's activating the Space Bridge network, setting up the pillars in a specific pattern that spans continents. Whatever he's planning requires precise positioning, and he's got human collaborators helping him place these devices in major cities without raising immediate alarm. The Autobots need answers. Why would Sentinel do this? What changed? Optimus refuses to believe his mentor was always evil. There has to be an explanation, something that happened during the fall of Cybertron that corrupted Sentinel's values. So they dig into history, into Cybertronian records recovered from the Ark, trying to understand the decision that led to this moment. And they find it. A recorded transmission from the final days of Cybertron, when the planet was dying and the Autobots were losing. Sentinel Prime, facing extinction of his entire race, made a choice. He contacted Megatron secretly and proposed a deal: stop the war, work together, save what remains of their world. The method? Find a planet with sufficient resources, organic life that could be enslaved, raw materials that could be harvested, and transport Cybertron there using the Space Bridge technology. Rebuild their civilization on the bones of another. Megatron agreed. Of course he agreed. It gave him everything he wanted. Cybertron restored, his people saved, and the Autobots' moral authority destroyed by their own leader's ruthlessness. Sentinel loaded the pillars onto the Ark, planning to find a suitable planet and prepare it for Cybertron's arrival. Earth was the target all along, rich in resources, primitive enough to conquer, perfectly positioned for their needs. But the Ark never made it to Earth initially. It crashed on the Moon, damaged during the escape from Cybertron, and Sentinel went into stasis expecting the Decepticons to eventually retrieve him, except they didn't. The war continued, spreading across the galaxy, and eventually both sides ended up on Earth for different reasons. The Decepticons had been searching for Megatron after he crashed here chasing the Allspark. The Autobots came following Optimus's leadership and the signal from the Allspark cube. When the humans discovered the Ark in 1969, neither faction knew it was there. The Decepticons only found out years later through their infiltration of space programs and aerospace companies. They've been working toward this moment for decades, recovering pieces of Cybertronian technology, positioning human assets, waiting for the right time to retrieve Sentinel and implement his plan. Now that time has come. Sentinel's awake, the pillars are in play, and the Decepticons have a leader who's actually competent, unlike Megatron in his weakened state. This is what makes Sentinel so dangerous. He's not motivated by conquest or power for its own sake. He genuinely believes he's saving his species. The needs of the many, Cybertronians, outweigh the needs of the few, humanity. It's cold utilitarian logic applied without mercy. Optimus confronts Sentinel in an abandoned industrial area where intelligence suggests he's meeting with Decepticon leadership. The scene crackles with tension because both of them know this is personal. Optimus isn't here as a soldier following orders. He's here as a student confronting a teacher who lied to him. Sentinel doesn't apologize. He explains, calmly and rationally, why this is necessary. Cybertron is dead. Their race is scattered and dying. Earth has billions of humans who could serve as labor, resources that could rebuild their world, a chance to restore what was lost. I will overlook your condescension, Optimus, as you are young and have much to learn, Sentinel says, which is a perfectly cutting line. He's not treating Optimus as an equal. He's treating him like a naive child who doesn't understand hard choices. The philosophical clash here elevates the confrontation. Optimus argues that freedom is the right of all sentient beings, that enslaving humanity isn't salvation, it's damnation. Sentinel counters that extinction is worse than slavery, that Optimus's idealism is a luxury they can't afford. We were gods once, all of us, Sentinel says, but here, there will only be one. It's ambition wrapped in pragmatism, and Leonard Nimoy delivers it with just enough righteousness that you almost understand his logic, even as you recognize it's monstrous. Megatron arrives during this confrontation, and you can see the power dynamic has shifted. Megatron is diminished, physically damaged, his authority weakened, while Sentinel commands the room. Hugo Weaving plays Megatron's resentment beautifully in just a few lines. This was supposed to be his conquest, his victory, and instead, he's playing second fiddle to someone who views their partnership as a temporary alliance of necessity. The fight that breaks out is brutal and brief. Optimus is powerful, but Sentinel's been a warrior far longer, and he's not holding back. Those double-bladed energon swords cut through Optimus's defenses. The cosmic rust cannon forces Optimus to stay mobile or risk the same fate as Ironhide, and when Decepticon reinforcements arrive, Optimus has to retreat. He can't win this fight, not today, not without help. Back at Nest headquarters, the political situation deteriorates rapidly. Meering and other government officials are in full crisis mode. The Autobots were supposed to be allies, but their presence has now brought an existential threat to Earth. Sentinel Prime is Autobot leadership, technically speaking. He outranks Optimus, he carried the original mission. The fact that he's now working with the Decepticons blurs the line between friend and enemy in ways that make politicians very nervous. There's a scene in the Pentagon Situation Room where various officials debate what to do. Some argue for increasing military support to the Autobots, helping them fight Sentinel and the Decepticons. Others argue that the Autobots themselves are the problem. If they hadn't come to Earth, if the Allspark had never been here, none of this would be happening. It's the classic, blame the refugee for the war that follows them, argument, and is playing out in real time. The pressure builds until it breaks. Meering delivers the news to Optimus the United Nations has voted. The Autobots must leave Earth immediately. The decision isn't up for debate. They'll be given transport off-planet, with the understanding that they're never to return. Humanity is choosing to face the Decepticon threat alone, rather than remain caught between two alien factions. This decision is framed as pragmatic, but there's cowardice underneath. The reasoning goes that if the Autobots leave, maybe Sentinel and the Decepticons will leave too. They're here for the space bridge technology and control of the planet. But without the Autobots to fight, maybe they'll take what they want and go. It's wishful thinking disguised as strategy. Optimus accepts the exile with devastating grace. We will honor your decision, for we are guests on your world, he says, and you can hear the betrayal underneath the words. The Autobots have fought for Earth, bled for it, lost friends defending humanity, and now they're being thrown out like unwanted house guests who overstayed their welcome. Sam absolutely loses it when he hears this news. He confronts Meering, argues with anyone who'll listen, tries to explain that sending the Autobots away is exactly what Sentinel wants. Without Autobot resistance, the Decepticons will do whatever they please. But he's a civilian with no official authority, and his warnings fall on bureaucratic ears that have already made up their institutional mind. The departure sequence is heavy with finality. The Autobots board the Xantium, a spacecraft provided by the U.S. government for their transport off Earth. Bumblebee, Ratchet, the Wreckers, Sideswipe, all the Autobots who fought alongside humans, formed bonds, made Earth a adopted home. They're leaving. Sam gets to say goodbye to Bumblebee, a moment that echoes their separation in the first film but with much more weight now. These two have been through multiple wars together. Bumblebee was Sam's first Transformer friend, and now they're being torn apart by political cowardice. Optimus is the last aboard. He takes one long look at Earth, the planet he tried to save, the species he tried to protect, and then he walks up that ramp. The Xantium's engines ignite. The ship rises into the atmosphere, heading for space, carrying the Autobots into permanent exile. And then the ship explodes. Fighters appear from nowhere, human fighters, equipped with advanced weapons, and they fire on the Xantium the moment it's clear of populated areas. The ship erupts in a fireball visible for miles. Debris rains down over the Atlantic. There are no survivors. The Autobots are gone. Except it's a setup. Sentinel orchestrated this through his human collaborators, Dylan Gould among them. The plan was never to let the Autobots leave peacefully. They had to be eliminated entirely, removed as a threat while making it look like human self-defense or perhaps a tragic accident. Mirroring watches the explosion on radar screens, and you see her realize what just happened. They didn't save Earth. They just helped murder the only allies they had. Dylan reveals his full role now. He's not just a collaborator, he's Sentinel's primary human operative, coordinating the placement of the remaining pillars in Chicago. Why Chicago? Because it's centrally located, it's got the infrastructure to support what's coming, and frankly, it's symbolic. Show the world that even America's heartland isn't safe, that no major city is beyond the Decepticons' reach. Dylan uses Carly to get to Sam, kidnapping her to ensure Sam's cooperation. It's a smart move because Sam's proven he's resourceful and connected. Better to control him than kill him. Dylan needs Sam to see what's about to happen, to understand that resistance is futile, to watch as everything he fought for crumbles. The Decepticon invasion of Chicago begins at dawn. Ships appear over the city, massive Cybertronian cruisers that drop through the clouds like falling mountains. Citizens look up from their morning routines to see an alien armada parking itself over their skyscraper. Panic spreads instantly. People run, cars crash, the city starts tearing itself apart in terror before the Decepticons even fire a shot. Then Sentinel activates the pillars. They're positioned in a wide circle around downtown Chicago, and when they power up simultaneously, reality itself seems to tear. A massive vortex opens in the sky, a swirling portal through space connecting 2 points across the galaxy, and through that portal comes Cybertron. Not the whole planet, not yet, but you can see it. The dead world. Metal surface scarred by eons of war, somehow holding together despite having no core, no life. It hangs in Earth's sky like a second moon, close enough that you can make out continents of rust and oceans of dried energon. The space bridge is pulling it through, slowly, preparing to transplant an entire alien world into Earth's orbit. The visual of this is genuinely apocalyptic. Cybertron's presence starts affecting Earth immediately. Gravitational disturbances, electromagnetic interference, pieces of Cybertronian debris falling through the portal and crashing into the city. Buildings crack under the stress. The ground shakes. This isn't an invasion in the traditional sense, it's a planetary merger, and humanity is about to become the minority population on its own world. Decepticon troops pour into Chicago by the thousands, not just the named characters, Starscream, Soundwave, Shockwave, but armies of generic Decepticon soldiers that we've never seen before in these films. They're establishing a perimeter, setting up weapon emplacements, converting portions of the city into Cybertronian territory. Human military tries to respond, but they're completely overwhelmed. Tanks and helicopters can't compete with alien technology that's millions of years more advanced. Shockwave's driller, that massive mechanical worm creature, emerges and starts tearing through skyscrapers like they're made of tissue paper. It burrows underground and surfaces blocks away, bringing buildings down in waves of destruction. The creature is a weapon of terror as much as a practical tool, showing Chicago's inhabitants that their strongest structures mean nothing against Cybertronian bioweapons. Sam, Carly, and a handful of others, including military operatives, EPs, and a team of Special Forces soldiers, are trapped in the city when the invasion begins. They watch the pillars activate from ground level, see Cybertron appear overhead, and understand that this is extinction-level threat. If Sentinel completes the bridge, if Cybertron fully transitions to Earth space, human civilization is finished. The planet can't support two competing species when one has technology millions of years more advanced and no ethical qualms about enslavement. But then something happens that nobody expected. Optimus Prime's voice comes through on military channels. Alive. The Xantium explosion was staged. The Autobots never actually boarded the ship. They anticipated the betrayal, sent the ship up empty, and let everyone think they were dead. It was the only way to make Sentinel overconfident, to make the human governments realize their mistake, to position themselves for a real counterattack. The Autobots are still on Earth, and they're coming to Chicago. This reveal recontextualizes everything. Optimus knew the exile was a trap. He played along, let his enemies think they'd won, and now he's got surprise on his side. The Autobots aren't just fighting to save Earth anymore. They're fighting to avenge Ironhide, to stop their own corrupted leader, to prove that Sentinel's utilitarian nightmare isn't the only way forward for their species. Ratchet, Bumblebee, Sideswipe, the Wrecker, they all start mobilizing towards Chicago from different positions. They can't match the Decepticons in numbers, but they've got something Sentinel's forces don't. They're fighting for a principle, not just survival. Freedom is still the right of all sentient beings, even when fighting for it seems impossible. The stage is set for the war's final battle. Chicago is occupied. Cybertron is hanging in the sky like a sword of Damocles. Human military is scrambling to respond, and Sam is somewhere in that urban war zone trying to save Carly and find a way to shut down the pillars. The second act ends with every piece in position, tensions at their peak, and the understanding that what's about to happen in Chicago will determine not just the war between Autobots and Decepticons, but the future of Earth itself. Sentinel Prime stands atop a ruined skyscraper, looking up at Cybertron appearing through his space bridge, and for the first time in millions of years, he's close to his goal. His world is coming home. All it costs is another world's freedom. And in Sentinel's calculation, that's a bargain worth making. Chicago is a cage. Decepticon forces have locked down a 20-block radius in the downtown area, establishing a perimeter that nothing enters or leaves without their permission. Citizens who didn't evacuate in time are either dead or hiding, praying that the metallic sounds of patrolling Decepticons don't get closer. The sky overhead churns with the space bridge's energy, Cybertron's rusted surface visible through atmospheric distortion. It's science fiction made horrifyingly real. The U.S. military response is massive but cautious. They can't just carpet bomb downtown Chicago. There are still civilians in there. And more importantly, they need to understand what they're dealing with before committing to a full assault. So they send in a special operations team first, Colonel Lennox and Master Sergeant Epps leading a unit of elite soldiers equipped with experimental weapons designed specifically for Transformer combat. Sam's with them because Dylan dragged Carly into the occupied zone, and Sam's not waiting for official rescue operation. The insertion method is insane even by military special ops standards. V-22 Ospreys fly the team to the edge of the Decepticon perimeter at high altitude, and then the soldiers jump. Not with parachutes, with wingsuits. Those flying squirrel suits that let humans glide through the air, steering with body position and limb angle. Except they're doing this between Chicago skyscrapers, while Decepticons patrol the streets below, and debris from Cybertron's gravitational effects randomly falls from the sky. This wingsuit sequence is pure Michael Bay spectacle, shot with those 3D cameras that make you feel like you're falling alongside the soldier. The camera swoops and dives, following suit-clad figures as they navigate between buildings, through gaps in architecture, riding air currents that probably shouldn't exist in an urban environment. It's exhilarating and terrifying, these fragile humans in fabric suits threading through an alien-occupied city at terminal velocity. Of course, the Decepticons notice. Starscream takes to the air, because of course he does. He's been waiting for an excuse to show off, and starts strafing the wingsuit team with his arm cannons. Soldiers get hit mid-glide, their suits torn apart, bodies tumbling into the urban canyon below. Sam's not in a wingsuit. He's in one of the Ospreys, watching this happen, seeing human beings die trying to create an opening for him to get into the city and save one person. The weight of that doesn't escape him. The survivors crash land on rooftops and through windows, scrambling for cover as Decepticon fire chases them. Lennox's team regroups in an abandoned office building, taking stock of who made it. They're down to maybe a dozen soldiers, all of them carrying specialized weapons, armor-piercing rounds, sonic disruptors, shaped charges designed to exploit weak points in Cybertronian anatomy. It's not much against an army, but it's what they've got. Sam's mission is straightforward in theory. Find Carly, find Dylan, and somehow get to those pillars. If they can disable enough of them, the space bridge might collapse before Cybertron fully transfers into Earth's orbit. In practice, this means navigating through hostile urban terrain, while building-sized robots hunt for survivors and Shockwave's driller periodically erupts from underground to demolish entire city blocks. They move through the war zone in short bursts, building to building, using abandoned vehicles for cover. Chicago's downtown is unrecognizable. Cars are crushed and scattered like toys, windows are blown out of every structure, fires burn unchecked, and the streets are covered in a mix of human debris and Cybertronian metal fragments. There's an eerie quality to an empty major city during daylight hours. It should be bustling with people, traffic, urban life. Instead, it's a ghost town punctuated by the mechanical sounds of Decepticon occupation. Shockwave makes his presence known by sending the drillers through a cluster of buildings that Sam's team is approaching. You feel it before you see it. Vibrations through the ground, that deep rumbling that says something massive is moving beneath you. Then the street cracks open, concrete and asphalt splitting like skin, and the driller surfaces. It's all writhing mechanical tentacles and grinding metal teeth, a creature that shouldn't exist but very clearly does. The soldiers open fire, trying to find a weak point, but their weapons barely scratch the thing. Armor-piercing rounds spark off its metal hide. Explosives create surface damage that the creature seems to ignore. It's not even really fighting them. It's treating them like insects that happen to be in its path, as it burrows back underground to emerge somewhere else and bring down another building. Meanwhile, Optimus Prime is inbound. He's not sneaking in. There's no stealth when you're a 30-foot-tall sentient robot. Instead, he comes in loud and violent, armed with everything the Autobots could scavenge and prepare. Flight technology salvaged from the Decepticon invasion forces in Revenge of the Fallen, armor plating reinforced with human weapon systems, and a fury that's been building since Sentinel betrayed everything they stood for. His entrance is a statement. Optimus doesn't land carefully. He crashes through a Decepticon gunship, tearing the thing in half on his way down, and hits the street with enough force to crack pavement. Decepticon soldiers converge on his position, and he tears through them like a force of nature. That energon axe he carries, forged from Cybertronian steel, cleaves through enemy armor. His arm cannon, a massive rotary weapon mounted on his forearm, chews through Decepticon, ranks with sustained fire that sounds like thunder. This is Optimus without restraint. Every other fight we've seen him in, there's been a sense of nobility, of a warrior who doesn't enjoy violence even when necessary. But Ironhide's death, Sentinel's betrayal, the knowledge that his mentor is enslaving an innocent species, it's stripped away that nobility and left something harder underneath. He's not just fighting, he's executing, systematically dismantling every Decepticon between him and Sentinel Prime. Bumblebee and the other Autobots joined the battle from different vectors. Bumblebee's fighting style is different from Optimus's, more guerrilla, using mobility and surprise. He transforms mid-combat, going from vehicle to robot in seconds, using that disorientation to get close and strike before enemies can react. Sideswipe brings his blade-based fighting technique, those arm-mounted swords that turn him into a close-quarters whirlwind. The Wrecker, Leadfoot, Roadbuster, and Topspin bring heavy weapons and a willingness to fight dirty, but they're outnumbered by a ridiculous margin. For every Decepticon they destroy, 3 more appear. Sentinel has been planning this for longer than anyone realized, positioning forces throughout the city, using the space bridge to bring in reinforcements directly from Cybertronian staging areas. The Autobots are fighting an enemy with near-infinite resources and a willingness to sacrifice those resources without hesitation. Sam's team finds Dylan and Carly in what used to be a luxury hotel, now converted into a command center for Sentinel's human collaborators. Dylan's playing his role to the end, smug, convinced he's on the winning side, explaining to Sam that resistance is pointless. Humanity had its chance. Now it's time to accept a new position in the cosmic hierarchy, servants to a superior species. Patrick Dempsey delivers these lines with casual cruelty, like he's discussing a business merger rather than the enslavement of billions. Carly gets one of the film's best character moments here. She's been positioned as the romantic interest, the damsel in distress, but when Dylan tries to use her as leverage against Sam, she turns the psychological warfare around. She's been listening, watching, understanding the Decepticon power dynamics, and she realizes something that Sam and the Autobots haven't. Megatron is weak and humiliated, taking orders from Sentinel, watching his grand conquest get executed by someone else. So Carly finds Megatron, who's perched on a demolished building watching the battle unfold below, and she talks to him. It's an audacious move, approaching a genocidal alien warlord to negotiate, but she makes it work. She points out that Sentinel's using him, that the Decepticons' new leader is the one making decisions while Megatron sits on the sidelines like an irrelevant has-been. You were supposed to be their leader, she says, digging into that ego. Now you're just Sentinel's bitch. Hugo Weaving's vocal performance during the scene is fascinating because you can hear Megatron processing this, his damaged ego responding to the manipulation even as he recognizes its manipulation. He's been diminished since his defeat in Revenge of the Fallen, physically and psychologically. Sentinel's arrival made it worse. Suddenly, Megatron's not even the most important Decepticon in his own invasion. The question Carly plants is simple. Is Megatron willing to be second forever, or would he rather take a gamble that might restore his position? Back at street level, Sam and Epps are trying to reach the central pillar, the control node that coordinates all the others. If they can destroy that, the space bridge network might collapse, but getting there means crossing through territory that Shockwave controls, and Shockwave is methodical in a way that makes him uniquely dangerous. He's not emotional like Megatron or honorable like Optimus. He's pure logic applied to military problems, and his solution to the human insurgency is straightforward. Eliminate all hiding places. That's when we get the building collapse sequence. Sam's team takes refuge in a skyscraper, catching their breath, planning their next move. Then, the building starts tipping. Shockwave and the driller have literally undermined the structure's foundation, and now 40 stories of steel and glass are slowly tilting, falling like a toppled tree in slow motion. Everyone inside starts sliding as gravity shifts furniture and equipment, tumbling toward what used to be walls and is now rapidly becoming floors. The sequence is shot with incredible attention to spatial physics. You feel the building tipping, understand how gravity's changing, track where characters are relative to the tilt. Glass windows shatter, and people are suddenly dangling from office furniture while the city rotates around them. The building falls for what feels like minutes, probably closer to 30 seconds in reality, before it crashes into an adjacent skyscraper, the impact killing the momentum and leaving Sam's team trapped in a broken structure wedged between two buildings at a 45-degree angle. They have to climb out, navigating through shattered architecture, while Decepticons outside realize the building's occupied and start firing into it. Concrete and metal explode around them. Someone doesn't make it. A soldier Sam's been talking to since the wingsuit insertion takes a blast from a Decepticon weapon and just ends. No dramatic death speech. One moment he's there, the next he's gone. A casualty of being human in a war between giants. Optimus, meanwhile, has been carving his way towards Sentinel's position. Every Decepticon that tries to stop him gets dismantled. When Starscream attacks from the air, Optimus shoots him down with brutal precision, tracking the fighter jet, leading the shot, and blowing Starscream out of the sky. When Decepticon heavy armor rolls in, tanks and assault vehicles, Optimus destroys them with a combination of weapons that turns that section of street into a war zone tableau. The confrontation between Optimus and Sentinel happens in a collapsed intersection, surrounded by destroyed vehicles and burning debris. Sentinel's waiting for him, both energon swords drawn, standing like a medieval knight prepared for single combat. "It's over, Sentinel," Optimus calls out, and Sentinel's response is classic. "Optimus, you have never learned to see. Your idealism has always blinded you. They fight with everything they have. This isn't the sparring match from earlier. This is two fully armed Cybertronian warriors trying to kill each other with every weapon at their disposal." Sentinel's fighting style is refined through millions of years of combat experience. He doesn't waste movement. Every strike has purpose. Optimus is younger but fueled by righteous anger, fighting not just for victory, but for everything Sentinel betrayed. The choreography is intense. Swords clash with enough force to send shockwaves through nearby structures. They grapple, use environmental objects as weapons, transform partially to gain tactical advantages. When Optimus gets the upper hand, Sentinel uses his cosmic rust weapon, forcing Optimus to dodge or risk the same death Ironhide suffered. When Sentinel presses an advantage, Optimus uses his flight tech to create distance and attack from unexpected angles. Megatron makes his choice. He's been watching this fight, calculating odds, and Carly's words have been festering. If Sentinel wins, Megatron stays irrelevant. But if Optimus wins and Megatron helps make that happen, maybe he gets his authority back. Maybe the Decepticons remember who their real leader is. It's selfish calculation disguised as tactical alliance, but it works. Megatron blindsides Sentinel mid-fight, just tackles him from the side with enough force to take them both through a building wall. Sentinel's caught completely off guard. He expected Megatron to honor their arrangement, didn't account for ego and pride overriding logic. The two of them fight briefly, Sentinel trying to understand why his ally just turned on him. Megatron not bothering to explain because he's too busy trying to tear Sentinel's head off. It's enough distraction for Optimus. He recovers, brings his weapons to bear, and joins the fight. Now it's 2 against 1, and even someone as skilled as Sentinel can't defend against both simultaneously. Megatron holds Sentinel down, an ironic reversal of their power dynamic, while Optimus delivers the killing blow. The Energon axe comes down, severs critical systems, and Sentinel Prime dies still believing he was right, that his sacrifice of Earth would have saved Cybertron, that the ends justified the means. With Sentinel gone, the Decepticon forces lose coordination. Soundwave tries to rally them, but there's confusion in the ranks. Their leader is dead, the pillars are still active but vulnerable, and Autobot forces are pressing advantages everywhere. Sam reaches the control pillar with explosives provided by military forces, and he plants charges at the base. It's such a human solution to an alien problem. You can't understand the technology, so you just blow it up and hope. The charges detonate. The control pillar collapses, and immediately the space bridge starts destabilizing. The vortex overhead flickers, energy currents becoming erratic. Cybertron, which had been slowly phasing into Earth's dimensional space, starts pulling back, the transfer reversing as the bridge technology fails. The other pillars around Chicago start overloading, exploding in sequence like dominoes falling. Megatron sitting in the ruins, damaged from the fight with Sentinel, watching his grand plan fall apart. Optimus approaches him, weapon ready, prepared to end this war once and for all. They've been fighting for millennia. How many times have they had this confrontation? How many chances has Optimus given him? But Megatron doesn't fight. He's exhausted, physically and emotionally. "You think you've won," he says, but there's no conviction behind it, just weariness. Optimus offers him a truce, actual peace after all these years of war. And you can see Megatron considering it, calculating whether there's value in continued conflict or if it's time to finally acknowledge defeat. Then Optimus shoots him anyway, multiple times, point blank, until Megatron's systems shut down and his optics go dark. It's a shocking moment because it feels almost like an execution rather than combat. But from Optimus's perspective, Megatron has had too many chances, caused too much death, broken too many truces. Mercy becomes complicity when you're dealing with someone who will always choose violence. So Optimus chooses finality. The space bridge collapses completely. Cybertron vanishes back through the portal. The vortex seals, and Chicago's sky returns to normal, or as normal as it can be with half the downtown area destroyed. Decepticon forces that are still functional retreat or go into hiding. The battle is over. The war, for now, is won. Sam finds Carly in the aftermath. They embrace in a destroyed street while fires burn around them, and military forces begin the slow process of securing the area. It's an ending that acknowledges cost. Chicago is devastated. Thousands are dead. Rebuilding will take years, but also survival. Humanity faced an extinction-level threat and lived through it. Optimus delivers his closing monologue standing atop rubble, looking out at the destroyed city he fought to save. He talks about sacrifice, about the price of freedom, about how the war cost both sides everything and gained nothing but survival. It's more melancholy than triumphant, a warrior acknowledging that victory in war is still defeat by another name. The film ends with that bittersweet tone. Earth is saved, the Autobots can stay. But at what cost? Chicago lies in ruins. Ironhide and other Autobots are dead. The relationship between humanity and Transformers is changed forever. There's no clean resolution, no reset to normal, just the understanding that they survived, and sometimes survival is all you get. Sam Witwicky enters Dark of the Moon as a fundamentally different person than the one we met in the 2007 film, and that evolution is what makes his character work here. Shia LaBeouf's playing someone who's been through genuine trauma, multiple alien wars, near-death experiences, holding cosmic artifacts that showed him the history of the universe, and now he's expected to apply for office jobs like none of that matters. There's a disconnect between who Sam became and who society needs him to be, and LaBeouf navigates that tension with a manic energy that could easily tip into annoying, but instead reads as authentic frustration. Watch how LaBeouf carries himself in those early job interview scenes. His body language is all nervous energy. Hands gesturing too much, words coming too fast because he's trying to condense extraordinary experiences into corporate-friendly bullet points. When an interviewer asks about his employment gap, Sam's face does this micro-expression, a flash of disbelief that his world-saving activities are being treated as resume problems. It's a small acting choice that sells the absurdity of his situation without him having to spell it out. The masculinity crisis angle could have been heavy-handed, but the script threads it carefully enough that it works as character motivation rather than thematic lecture. Sam's living in his girlfriend's shadow, literally living in an apartment she's paying for, wearing clothes she probably bought him, attending her work functions where he's introduced as Carly's boyfriend rather than his own person. For someone who's defined himself by action and heroism, this domestic dependency is emasculating in ways that clearly eat at him. But here's what makes Sam interesting in this film. He's not entirely wrong to feel inadequate, and he's not entirely right either. Yes, he saved the world. Yes, he deserves recognition, but he's also wrapped his entire identity around being the guy who matters, and when that's taken away, he doesn't know who he is. The job search rejection montage isn't just comedy, it's showing us someone whose sense of self is entirely external, built on validation from extraordinary circumstances rather than internal values. His relationship with Carly brings this into focus. Rosie Huntington-Whiteley is working with a character who could have been pure eye candy. Let's be honest, that's probably why she was cast. But she and the script give Carly more agency than you'd expect. She's not waiting for Sam to save her. She's got her own career, her own success, her own connections. When Sam spirals into jealousy about her boss Dylan, Carly doesn't coddle him. She gets frustrated because his insecurity is becoming her problem, and she's tired of managing his ego. There's a scene where they're arguing in the apartment, and Sam's complaining that he can't compete with Dylan's wealth and status. Carly's response, "I don't need you to be rich, I need you to be present," lands because Huntington Whiteley delivers it with exasperation rather than gentle understanding. She's not his therapist, she's his partner, and partners get frustrated when you keep making the same emotional mistakes. Carly's character pays off during the Chicago invasion when she confronts Megatron. That scene works specifically because it's not about combat prowess or special skills. It's about Carly being emotionally intelligent enough to recognize a psychological weakness and ruthless enough to exploit it. She sees Megatron the way she probably sees insecure men in business meetings, powerful on the surface, but desperately afraid of being perceived as inadequate. Her line about Sentinel using him isn't just an insult. It's a precisely targeted psychological attack designed to trigger ego-based decision-making. Huntington Whiteley plays that scene with remarkable calm, considering she's talking to a giant alien warlord who could kill her by accident. There's no tremor in her voice, no backing down. She's negotiating from a position of complete physical weakness but psychological strength. And you believe she's capable of it because we've seen her navigate Dylan's manipulations and Sam's insecurities earlier. She understands how fragile male ego can be, even when that male is a millennia-old robot. Optimus Prime undergoes one of his most significant character evolutions in this film, and Peter Cullen's vocal performance carries the weight of that transformation. In the first Transformers movie, Optimus was almost mythically noble, the wise alien leader who arrived on Earth to teach humanity about freedom and sacrifice. By Dark of the Moon, that nobility has been tested to breaking point, and what emerges is something harder, more willing to make brutal choices. Cullen's voice work has always been the soul of Optimus, that deep baritone that sounds like it's carrying the weight of ages. But listen to how he modulates it throughout this film. When Optimus is speaking to Sentinel after the revival, there's genuine warmth and deference in his tone. He's talking to a mentor, someone he respects beyond measure. When he discovers Sentinel's betrayal, that warmth is replaced by something cold and sharp. Cullen doesn't yell, doesn't rage. Instead, he pulls all emotion out of his voice until Optimus sounds almost mechanical, like he shut down his emotional processing to avoid dealing with the pain. The moment where Optimus finds Ironhide's body is devastating precisely because Cullen plays it so simply. "You were like a brother to me," delivered with just the slightest crack in that otherwise unshakable voice. It's one line, but it contains centuries of friendship, of battles fought side by side, of trust that was never questioned because it didn't need to be. And now that's gone, killed, by someone Optimus trusted even more. What makes Optimus compelling in this film is watching him wrestle with the limits of his idealism. His entire philosophy is built on freedom as a universal right, on the belief that all sentient beings deserve autonomy and choice. Sentinel challenges that by pointing out that ideals are luxuries you can afford when you're winning, but the Autobots are losing. They've been losing for millions of years. At what point does maintaining moral purity become self-destructive? Optimus's answer comes in his actions during the Chicago battle. He doesn't fight like a hero trying to minimize casualties. He fights like a soldier trying to win a war, and that means killing efficiently and without hesitation. When he executes Megatron at the end, and make no mistake, that's what it is. He's making a choice that earlier versions of his character wouldn't have made. Megatron's unarmed, defeated, possibly even offering genuine truce. And Optimus shoots him anyway because he's learned that mercy toward those who will never change is just delayed cruelty toward their future victim. Cullen sells that moment with the tiniest pause before Optimus fires. You can hear the calculation happening, the decision being made to abandon one principle, mercy, in service of another, protecting innocent. It's character development shown through voice acting and animation rather than exposition, and it's remarkably effective. Sentinel Prime is the film's most complex character, and Leonard Nimoy brings gravitas that elevates every scene he's in. Casting Nimoy is itself a statement. This is Spock, the character who famously said, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few," now voicing a character who's weaponized that exact philosophy into justification for genocide. It's metatextual commentary built into the casting choice, and Nimoy clearly understood the assignment. Listen to how Nimoy plays Sentinel's conviction. There's no mustache-twirling villainy, no indication that Sentinel thinks he's doing wrong. Every line is delivered with absolute certainty that his actions are not just justified but necessary. When he tells Optimus, "You would have done the same," there's no mockery in it. He genuinely believes Optimus will eventually understand that pragmatism must override idealism when facing extinction. Sentinel's tragedy, and he is a tragic character despite being the antagonist, is that his logic is internally consistent. Cybertron is dead. The Cybertronian race is dying. Earth has resources and a population that could be put to use, saving what remains of his people. From a pure utilitarian calculation, sacrificing one species to save another isn't evil, it's math. The problem is that math doesn't account for the intrinsic value of freedom, for the moral weight of reducing billions of humans to slavery, for the corruption of values that happens when you decide some lives matter more than others. Nimoy gives Sentinel this weary nobility, like he's exhausted by having to explain obvious truth to naive children. When he says, "We were gods once," there's genuine grief in it. Grief for what was lost, for the civilization that fell, for the compromises that war forced upon him. He didn't start as a character willing to enslave planets. He became that through incremental moral erosion, each compromise making the next one easier, until he arrived at a place where betraying his own student and murdering loyal Autobots seemed like acceptable costs. The relationship between Sentinel and Optimus is father-son in all but biology, which makes the betrayal hit harder. Sentinel literally gave Optimus the matrix of leadership, chose him as successor, trusted him to carry on the Autobot cause, and Optimus built his entire leadership philosophy around what Sentinel taught him. When those two worldviews collide, Sentinel's pragmatic ruthlessness versus Optimus's idealistic nobility, it's not just a political disagreement. It's a family member telling you that everything they taught you was wrong, or at least incomplete. Their fight choreography reflects this relationship. Watch how Sentinel fights. He's teaching even while trying to kill. His moves are textbook Cybertronian combat, the techniques he probably taught Optimus millions of years ago. Now Optimus has to use those lessons against their source, and there's tragedy in that symmetry. Sentinel's not just physically dominating in their early confrontations, he's psychologically dominating, using his authority as mentor to shake Optimus's confidence. Megatron is diminished throughout this film, and that diminishment is the point. Hugo Weaving plays him as a wounded animal, still dangerous but desperate, lashing out more from reflex than strategy. Half his face is missing, his body's held together with scavenged parts, and his authority is eroding with every scene. When he shows up to meetings with Sentinel, he's treated like junior partner in a venture that was supposed to be his conquest. Weaving's vocal performance captures this descent beautifully. In the first film, Megatron was imperious, commanding, every word an order that expected obedience. By Dark of the Moon, there's a petulant quality creeping into his delivery, a defensiveness that suggests he knows he's losing relevance but doesn't know how to stop it. When Carly calls him Sentinel's bitch, Weaving lets a moment of silence hang there. Megatron processing the insult, recognizing its truth, and deciding that ego matters more than strategy. That's ultimately what makes Megatron turn on Sentinel. Not tactical advantage, not sudden moral awakening, but wounded pride. He's been the leader of the Decepticons for millennia. He's not going to end his story as someone else's subordinate, even if that someone else is winning. It's a fundamentally selfish choice disguised as a strategic one, and it gets him killed because Optimus isn't interested in rewarding that selfishness with survival. Ironhide's death hits hard because he's been the Autobots' loyal soldier through all three films. His character doesn't get deep psychological exploration. He's the weapons specialist, the tough guy, the one who shoots first and asks questions rarely. But that consistency made him reliable, and reliability builds affection over time. When Sentinel shoots him, we're not just losing a character, we're losing the Autobot equivalent of your friend's reliable older brother who always had your back. Bumblebee continues to be Sam's closest Autobot connection, and the film wisely doesn't try to force too much plot around him. He's there when needed, fights with characteristic scrappiness, but the emotional weight of his relationship with Sam is established enough that it doesn't require constant reinforcement. The goodbye scene before the fake exile works because we've been with these two since the first film. We don't need exposition about why they matter to each other. Dylan Gould is interesting as a human antagonist because Patrick Dempsey plays him as someone who's convinced he's being practical. He's not a cartoon villain cackling about humanity's downfall. He's a businessman who's assessed the situation, determined the Decepticons are going to win, and decided to be on the winning side. His wealth and privilege have taught him that survival means aligning with power, regardless of morality. It's collaborator psychology, the kind that appears in every occupation throughout history. People who convince themselves that working with invaders is pragmatic rather than cowardly. Dempsey brings charm to the role, which makes Dylan more effective as a villain. He's handsome, successful, says the right things at social gatherings. On the surface, he's exactly the kind of guy Carly should be with instead of neurotic, unemployed Sam. That surface appeal makes his actual role more insidious. He's a predator hiding in plain sight, using wealth and charisma to mask his collaboration with genocidal aliens. Charlotte Meering, played by Frances McDormand, represents government institutions' ambivalent relationship with the Autobots. She's not evil, not even particularly antagonistic. She's a bureaucrat trying to manage an impossible situation. Alien allies who bring alien enemies, technology that could revolutionize or destroy humanity, political pressures from every direction. McDormand plays her with brisk efficiency, someone who doesn't have time for emotional considerations because she's too busy dealing with logistics. Her character represents system's inherent conservatism, the institutional instinct to protect itself even at the cost of better outcomes. When she pushes for Autobot exile, it's not because she hates them, it's because exiling them is politically easier than fighting alongside them, and institutions always choose easier when scared. McDormand gives Meering just enough humanity that you understand her choices even when you disagree with them. She's not a villain, just someone whose job incentivizes bad decisions. Lennox and Epps, the human military characters played by Josh Duhamel and Tyrese Gibson, serve as audience surrogates for the action sequences. They're capable soldiers who understand they're outgunned but fight anyway because that's the job. Gibson gets some of the film's better human moments during the Chicago battle, reacting to the insanity around him with appropriate, "we're all going to die" energy that doesn't undercut the stakes but acknowledges their absurdity. What works about these military characters is that they're competent without being superhuman. They can't fight Transformers one-on-one and win. They use tactics, positioning, specialized weapons, and mostly they survive by being useful enough to keep around but not threatening enough to warrant focused attention. It's realistic power scaling in a movie about giant alien robots, and it makes their contributions feel earned rather than plot-mandated. The Wrecker, Leadfoot, Roadbuster, and Topspin represent a different kind of Autobot warrior. They're rougher, less concerned with human sensibilities, more willing to use overwhelming force. The film uses them sparingly, but when they show up with their heavy weapons and aggressive tactics, they provide contrast to Optimus's more controlled approach. Not all Autobots are noble philosophers. Some are just soldiers who enjoy fighting, and the franchise is richer for acknowledging that diversity. Shockwave gets limited characterization beyond ruthless Decepticon commander, but his design and presence are memorable enough that it works. He's pure function, logical, efficient, emotionless execution of military objectives. The Driller is an extension of that philosophy, a weapon designed to destroy infrastructure and create terror without requiring complex strategy. Together they represent Decepticon military doctrine at its most brutally simple: identify the target, deploy overwhelming force, move to next target. Sam's parents, played by Kevin Dunn and Julie White, return for comic relief that's less intrusive than in previous films. They're worried about their son, proud of him in ways they can't express publicly, and completely out of their depth in this world of alien warfare. Their presence serves mostly to ground Sam's civilian life, reminding us that he comes from a normal suburban background that makes his extraordinary experiences even more disorienting. What Dark of the Moon does well with its ensemble is giving most characters clear functions without trying to give everyone equal screen time or development arcs. Not every character needs to grow. Some are there to provide specific skills: military tactics, comic relief, emotional stakes, physical threat. And the film respects that functional approach rather than forcing development where it doesn't serve the story. The character work elevates what could have been pure spectacle into something with genuine emotional stakes. We care when Ironhide dies because we've spent time with these characters across multiple films. We understand Optimus's fury because we've seen his values tested repeatedly. We feel Sam's desperation because his identity crisis has been building throughout the runtime, and we recognize Sentinel's tragedy because the film took time to establish his relationship with Optimus before shattering it. This is blockbuster filmmaking that remembers characters' drive story, not the other way around. The robot fights are spectacular, but they matter because we understand what's at stake for the individuals involved. The Chicago destruction is horrifying because we've been in the streets with Sam and the soldiers, experiencing it at ground level rather than just watching from distant camera angles. The performances range from subtle, Cullen's voice work, Nimoy's gravitas, to broad, LaBeouf's manic energy, Gibson's reactions, but they're all calibrated to the film's tone. This isn't naturalistic drama. It's heightened reality where giant robots fight over philosophical differences. The acting matches that heightened reality without tipping into camp, finding the human truth inside the absurd premise. Character relationships provide the film's emotional architecture. Sam and Carly's relationship problems ground the alien invasion in recognizable human drama. Optimus and Sentinel's mentor-student betrayal gives the conflict personal weight beyond just good guys versus bad guys. Megatron's wounded pride makes his eventual turn on Sentinel feel psychologically consistent rather than plot convenient. Even minor characters get moments that establish personality. Laserbeak isn't just a spy, he's a hunter who seems to enjoy his executions. Soundwave isn't just following orders. He's coordinating a complex operation with professional precision. Starscream isn't just another Decepticon, he's an opportunistic coward who attacks when he has advantage and retreats when threatened. The film asks its characters to make impossible choices and then lives with the consequences of those choices. Sam chooses to enter occupied Chicago, knowing he might die. Optimus chooses to kill Megatron, knowing it means abandoning a principle he's held for millions of years. Sentinel chooses to betray everything he taught. Optimus because he believes Cybertronian survival justifies any cost. Carly chooses to manipulate Megatron, knowing one wrong word means instant death. These choices define the characters more than any amount of exposition could. We understand who they are by watching what they do under pressure, when stakes are highest and safety isn't an option. That's character development through action, and Dark of the Moon deploys it consistently throughout its runtime. The result is a film populated by characters who feel like they exist beyond their plot functions, who have histories and relationships and values that inform their decisions. Not every character gets equal depth. This is still a Michael Bay film where explosions matter more than psychology, but enough care is taken that when the emotional beats arrive, they land with genuine impact rather than hollow manipulation. Michael Bay shot Transformers, Dark of the Moon, with the same 3D camera rigs that James Cameron used on Avatar, and that choice fundamentally shaped how the film looks and feels. These weren't the cheap post-conversion 3D systems that studios were slapping onto everything in 2011 to cash in on Avatar's success. These were fusion camera systems, massive, expensive rigs that recorded stereoscopic images natively, capturing actual depth information rather than faking it in post-production. The cameras were bulky and difficult to work with, limiting certain types of shots, but the payoff shows in every frame. What native 3D capture does that conversion can't replicate is create genuine spatial relationships between foreground and background elements. When Optimus leaps through the air with debris flying around him, the 3D isn't just making things pop out at the audience, it's establishing where he is relative to the environment, how fast he's moving through space, which pieces of shrapnel are close versus far. Your brain processes that depth, information the same way it processes real-world spatial data, making the action more viscerally comprehensible, even when it's moving at insane speeds. Bay, love him or hate him, understands visual geography better than most action directors. His signature style, low camera angles, wide lenses that create depth, circular camera moves that establish 360-degree spatial awareness, all of that translates beautifully to stereoscopic cinematography. When the camera swoops around a battle between Optimus and Sentinel, the 3D depth makes it easier to track who's where, who has advantage, how the fight's flowing. That's technical craft serving narrative rather than just providing gimmicky moments. The visual effects work required to pull off this film is staggering when you break down what industrial light and magic had to accomplish. Every Transformer is a CG character with thousands of individual moving parts. When Optimus transforms from truck to robot, the animation team has to account for where every piece of his body goes. Doors become parts of his torso, wheels fold into his legs, the truck's grille shifts to accommodate his chest plate. And all of this has to happen in ways that look mechanical and plausible, following consistent rules about how his body works. ILM developed specific transformation sequences for each Autobot and Decepticon that remain consistent throughout the franchise. Watch Bumblebee transform in any film and you'll see the same mechanical choreography. It's not random CGI magic, it's a design sequence that the animators refined and repeated. That consistency makes the Transformers feel like real machines with actual engineering rather than amorphous CGI blobs that change shape however the plot demands. The rendering challenges are immense. Transformers are made of metal, which means every surface is reflective to some degree. Metal reflects the environment, other characters, light sources. Computing those reflections accurately, especially for characters in constant motion during action sequences, requires massive processing power. ILM used ray tracing technology, shooting virtual light rays through the scene to calculate how they'd bounce off surfaces, to create reflections and lighting that feel physically accurate. Look at Sentinel Prime in outdoor daylight scenes. You can see the sky reflected in his armor, see other characters' shapes distorted in curved metal surfaces, see how direct sunlight creates hot spots on chrome while shadowed areas show cooler reflected light. That's not artistic license. That's accurate physical simulation of how light behaves when hitting metallic objects. It's details that your conscious mind might not register, but your visual cortex processes, making the characters feel real even though they're obviously impossible. The Chicago destruction sequence represents a high watermark for digital environment destruction in 2011. When buildings collapse, they're not just pre-animated toppling models. ILM used physics simulation systems that calculated how structures would actually fail based on where they were damaged, what materials they're made from, how gravity and momentum would affect falling debris. The building that tips over with Sam inside fails at specific stress points. You can see the architectural supports giving way first, see the structure's integrity cascading into failure. Creating digital versions of Chicago's downtown required extensive reference photography. ILM's team photographed every building in the battle zone from multiple angles, capturing texture details, architectural features, the way light hits different surfaces at different times of day. Those photographs were then used to build detailed 3D models that could be destroyed, burned, or blown apart while maintaining visual consistency with the real locations. But here's the crucial part. Bay also shot practical footage in downtown Chicago with actual vehicles, actual explosions, actual stunt performers. The film intercuts CG environments with real location photography seamlessly. When human soldiers are running through streets with explosions behind them, those are real streets with practical pyrotechnics. When the camera pulls back to show Decepticons towering over those same streets, that's CG replacing or augmenting the environment. The blend is so smooth that it's often impossible to tell where practical ends and digital begins. The driller creature required a completely different animation approach than the humanoid Transformers. It's biomechanical, part machine, part creature, which means it needs to move with weight and physicality but also have organic fluidity. ILM's animators studied real worms, snakes, and other creatures that move via body undulation, then translated those movement patterns into something that makes sense for a 100-foot-long mechanical tentacle monster. Watch the driller burrow through buildings. Its body segments compress and expand, creating the force needed to push through concrete and steel. Debris doesn't just explode outward randomly, it's pushed in specific directions based on how the driller's body is moving, what parts are making contact with structures, where the force vectors are strongest. It's animation that respects physics, even while depicting something fantastical. The wingsuit sequence showcases Bay's action cinematography at its most technically sophisticated. Real skydivers in wingsuits performed actual flights for reference footage, giving the animators and visual effects teams data on how fabric behaves in high-speed air currents, how bodies shift to steer, what falling at terminal velocity looks like from various camera angles. Then that was augmented with impossible camera moves, virtual cameras that could fly alongside the soldiers, weave between them, track falling debris, all while maintaining spatial coherence. Cinematographer Amir Mokri, working with Bay, used a combination of real aerial photography, wire work with performers and sound stages, and fully CG sequences to construct the wingsuit attack. Some shots are real skydivers composited into CG environments. Some are CG soldiers in environments based on real Chicago photography. Some are entirely digital. The fact that you can't easily identify which is which demonstrates how sophisticated the blending techniques had become by 2011. Sound design in Transformers films deserves recognition as a major component of what makes these characters feel real. Every Transformer has a distinct audio signature. Optimus's voice reverberates with bass frequencies that suggest his size and weight. When he walks, you hear hydraulics hissing, metal joints articulating, servos adjusting balance. His transformation sound, that iconic mechanical whirring, was constructed from dozens of layered mechanical sound effects recorded from actual machinery, then pitched and processed until they sounded appropriately alien. The sound team recorded everything they could get their hands on: car engines, industrial machinery, metal, scraping on metal, hydraulic systems, turbines, motors. Then, they layered and manipulated those recordings to create the Transformers' sonic vocabulary. Bumblebee's transformation sounds different from Optimus's, which sounds different from Sentinel. It's not just random mechanical noise. Each character has consistent audio that helps identify them even when they're off-screen or moving too fast to clearly see. Weapon sounds got similar attention. Optimus's Energon axe has a distinctive ignition sound when he draws it, a kind of electric charge, up followed by a humming resonance that suggests immense power barely contained. When that axe hits another Transformer, the impact sound is layered. The initial collision, the metal deformation, the energy discharge, the reverb through nearby structures. It's sound design that makes impacts feel devastating rather than just loud. The Chicago battle soundscape is masterfully constructed. In sequences with dozens of Decepticons fighting human military forces and Autobots, the sound mix prioritizes what's narratively important without becoming chaotic mush. When dialogue happens, combat sounds duck slightly so you can hear it. When a major impact occurs, building collapsing, driller emerging, that sound temporarily dominates the mix. When the action's continuous but no specific moment needs emphasis, the sound team creates what's essentially urban warfare ambience: distant explosions, energy weapons firing, structural groaning, screaming civilians. Steve Jablonsky's orchestral score integrates with the sound design rather than competing with it. During pure action sequences, the music often drops out entirely, letting sound effects carry the intensity. When music does come in, it's usually marking emotional beats: Optimus arriving to save the day, a moment of sacrifice, victory, or loss. Jablonsky uses a recurring Transformers theme, variations on it, identifying specific characters or factions, creating musical continuity across the franchise. The action choreography for Transformer fights required animators who understood martial arts, weight distribution, and momentum physics. When Optimus fights Sentinel, their moves aren't random. They're structured like actual sword fighting, with attacks, parries, feints, and counterattack. Sentinel's double-bladed style gives him reach and unpredictability, forcing Optimus to stay mobile. Optimus's axe and gun combination gives him range options, letting him switch between close and distant combat depending on tactical needs. ILM's animation team studied samurai sword fighting for Sentinel's combat style. Those double blades require constant spinning and momentum maintenance. If you stop the rotation, you lose the defensive coverage that spinning provides. Watch Sentinel fight and you'll see him constantly in motion, blades whirling, creating a defensive perimeter that's dangerous to breach. It's animated choreography based on real martial arts principles, adapted for a 30-foot robot with superhuman strength. Megatron's fighting style is more brutal and direct. He uses his size and strength to overpower rather than outmaneuver. When he tackles Sentinel, it's not technique, it's just mass times velocity equals force. His damaged state makes him less graceful than he probably once was, so his attacks are desperate and primal, which actually makes them more viscerally effective. Hugo Weaving's vocal performance combines with that animation to create a character who's dangerous specifically because he's wounded and desperate. Practical effects still play a crucial role even in this CGI-heavy film. Real cars get flipped and exploded. Real buildings, specifically one scheduled for demolition, got partially destroyed for camera. Real pyrotechnics create explosions that CG then augments and enhances. The highway chase sequence used practical vehicle stunts coordinated by stunt teams who've worked on action films for decades, creating real automotive chaos that visual effects teams then added Decepticons into. This hybrid approach, practical foundations augmented with digital elements, gives the action weight and texture that pure CG often lacks. When a real car flips and crashes, the metal crumples in ways that perfectly obey physics because it's actually happening. When digital Decepticons then appear to have caused that crash, your brain accepts it more readily because the consequences look real. Bay's cinematographic choices throughout the film show a director who understands action grammar. He uses slow motion strategically, not constantly. When something needs emphasis, a particular impact, a moment of realization on a character's face during chaos, the frame rate drops and lets you absorb the detail. But he doesn't overuse the technique, which means when it happens, it actually enhances rather than becoming white noise. His camera placement tends toward the heroic low angles that make characters look imposing, backlit shots that create dramatic silhouettes, wide lenses that exaggerate depth and make spaces feel larger. It's not subtle filmmaking, but it's effective for the story being told. When Optimus arrives in Chicago with his flight tech and heavy weapons, Bay shoots him from below, making him fill the frame, backlit by the sun so he's this massive armored silhouette descending like an angel of death. It's operatic visual storytelling that announces, the hero has arrived without needing dialogue. The 3D depth also allows Bay to play with layering in ways that 2D filmmaking can't quite achieve. In several shots, you've got action happening in foreground, midground, and background simultaneously. Humans fighting in the foreground, Transformers battling in the midground, buildings collapsing in the background. The stereoscopic depth makes all three layers readable rather than becoming a confusing mess. Your eye can choose what to focus on or take in the full scope of the chaos. Editing by Roger Barton, William Goldenberg, and Joel Negron keeps the action comprehensible despite the speed and complexity. There's a rhythm to how the Chicago battle is cut-wide shots, established geography, medium shots show specific conflicts, close-ups capture emotional reactions, then back out to wide to re-establish where everyone is. That pattern repeats throughout, giving viewers spatial anchors so they never get completely lost. The film's color grading shifts based on what's happening. The moon landing opening has that washed-out, high-contrast look of actual 1960s footage. Sam's civilian life in Washington, D.C. is warm and naturalistic, normal color tones for a normal life. Once the Chicago invasion starts, the color palette becomes cooler and more desaturated, blues and grays dominating, giving everything a metallic, dystopian feel. It's subtle mood manipulation through color timing that supports the narrative without drawing attention to itself. Lighting during the battle sequences uses motivated sources. The space bridge portal creates purple-blue light that illuminates the sky. Fires create warm orange light. Explosions provide brief hot white flashes. These aren't random colors chosen for aesthetic reasons. They're what those light sources would actually create. The CG Transformers are lit with the same environmental lighting as the practical elements, which is part of what makes the composites work so seamlessly. One technical challenge that doesn't get enough recognition: animating convincing facial expressions on characters who don't have human faces. Optimus's face is metal, with glowing optics for eyes and a mouthplate that moves when he speaks. Creating emotional expression with those limited elements requires understanding how even small movements read psychologically. When Optimus is angry, his optics glow brighter. When he's sad, they dim. His brow plates move slightly to suggest furrowed concentration or surprise. It's minimalist character animation that has to convey complex emotions with very few tools. The film's pacing is controlled through action escalation. The opening battle in the Middle East is relatively small. A few Autobots versus Decepticon forces in one facility. The highway chases larger vehicles, and Decepticons attacking on public roads with civilian casualties. Chicago is apocalyptic, an entire city under siege with armies clashing. Each action sequence raises the stakes and scale, preventing audience fatigue by constantly showing something bigger than what came before. Bay's use of slow motion isn't just for style, it's serving practical purpose. When the building collapses with Sam inside, slow motion lets you track the spatial relationships as gravity shifts. In real time, that sequence would be too fast and chaotic to comprehend. Slowed down, you can see how the tilt affects different parts of the structure, how characters are falling relative to furniture and walls, how the impact happens in stages rather than all at once. The driller's destruction of buildings uses a technique where the creature's body remains mostly in real time while the destruction around it is slightly slow motion. This creates a contrast that makes the driller seem even more unstoppable. It's moving at normal speed while the buildings it's demolishing seem to crumble in delayed reaction, emphasizing the force involved. It's a subtle temporal manipulation that affects how powerful the creature feels. Sound mixing during the most chaotic sequences employs a technique called frequency splitting. Low-frequency sounds, explosions, impacts, massive movements get separated from mid-range sounds, weapons fire, smaller collisions, and high-frequency sounds, debris falling, glass breaking, human voices. Each frequency range is mixed separately and then combined, ensuring that nothing gets lost in the sonic chaos. You can hear individual elements even when 50 things are happening simultaneously. The film's climactic fights use what could be called interrupted geography. The locations keep changing as buildings collapse and the environment gets destroyed, forcing fighters to adapt to shifting terrain. Optimus can't use the same tactics throughout because the space he's fighting in keeps transforming. This creates variety in the action and also reinforces how devastating the battle is. Even the battlefield itself can't remain consistent. Practical stunts during the building collapse sequence used rotating sets similar to what Inception employed. The interior office space was built on a gimbal system that could tilt, allowing actors to practically slide and fall as the set rotated. Then digital elements were added. The Chicago skyline visible through windows, the impact with the adjacent building, debris behavior that would be too dangerous with real actors. But the foundation is practical, giving performers something real to react to. The integration of real actors with CG transformers has been refined significantly by this third film. When Sam's talking to Bumblebee, the eye line matches. The lighting on Sam matches what would bounce off Bumblebee's metal body, and Bumblebee's reflections include Sam and the environment. These details are easy to miss, but crucial for maintaining the illusion that they're occupying the same space. Bay's action filmmaking philosophy is essentially maximalism. More vehicles, more explosions, more scale, more everything. That approach could easily become numbing, but the film avoids it by varying the type of action. Vehicle chases feel different from robot fistfights, which feel different from building destruction, which feel different from human soldiers in urban warfare. Each action sequence has its own texture and rules, keeping the experience from becoming homogeneous. The technical achievement of Dark of the Moon is making impossibly complex action comprehensible and visceral. When you watch the Chicago battle, you're processing hundreds of millions of dollars worth of visual effects, sound design, practical stunts, and motion capture, all blended seamlessly into what feels like watching something real, despite knowing it's obviously impossible. That's craft. At the highest level, technology serving story, spectacle serving emotion, every technical choice made in service of making you feel something rather than just impressing you with what's possible. Dark of the Moon wrestles with a question that most blockbusters avoid. What happens when your moral principles lead to extinction? Sentinel Prime embodies utilitarian philosophy taken to its logical extreme. If saving millions of Cybertronians requires enslaving billions of humans, the math is simple. More lives saved than destroyed equals moral correctness. If the trolley problem scaled to planetary genocide, and the film doesn't dismiss his logic as obviously wrong, it treats it as tragically understandable. This creates genuine philosophical tension because Sentinel isn't insane or purely evil. He's applying the same logic that governments use during wartime, the same calculations that emergency responders make during disaster. Save the most lives possible with available resources. The problem emerges when you zoom out and ask who gets to decide whose lives count more. Sentinel's decided Cybertronian lives outweigh human lives, but on what basis? Technological advancement? Cultural history? The fact that his species is facing extinction while humanity isn't? Optimus represents the counterargument. Freedom matters more than survival. It's a position that sounds noble in peacetime but becomes almost impossibly difficult when your species is actually dying. How do you tell refugees that they can't have a new home because the current inhabitants haven't consented to share? How do you prioritize abstract principles when concrete extinction is the alternative? The film gives Optimus the hero role, but it doesn't pretend his position is cost-free. Autobots die for his idealism. Cybertron remains dead. The price of maintaining moral principles is measured in lives. The Leonard Nimoy casting adds layers to this philosophical debate that extend beyond the film itself. Spock's needs of the many, line from Star Trek II, has become cultural shorthand for utilitarian sacrifice, one person choosing to die to save the crew. Here, Sentinel weaponizes that exact philosophy but inverts it. Many people, humans, should be sacrificed to save the many, Cybertronian. It exposes how utilitarian logic can justify atrocity depending on who you're counting as part of the many. Are humans included in Sentinel's moral calculations? Clearly not. They're resources, not people with rights. Betrayal functions as both plot mechanism and thematic exploration. Sentinel's betrayal of Optimus mirrors every mentor-student relationship where the student realizes their teacher's values aren't what they seemed. But it's more complex than simple hypocrisy. Sentinel hasn't abandoned his values. He's refined them through harsh experience into something Optimus finds unrecognizable. War didn't corrupt Sentinel's morality. It revealed which parts he was willing to sacrifice when forced to choose. This speaks to the film's darker suggestion that idealism might be a luxury of those who haven't lost everything. Optimus can maintain his principles about freedom because he's never faced the specific choice. Sentinel faced, watch your entire civilization die while holding to moral absolutes, or compromise those absolutes for a chance at survival. The film positions Optimus as correct, but it doesn't condemn everyone who'd make Sentinel's choice as evil. Just as wrong, perhaps. Or maybe just less fortunate in what circumstances demanded of them. The historical conspiracy angle introduces questions about truth and who controls it. The moon landing, one of humanity's proudest achievements, gets recontextualized as part of an alien Cold War. What other historical events might have hidden dimensions? The film suggests that ordinary people move through life unaware of massive forces shaping their reality, and that ignorance might be intentional. Governments keep secrets supposedly for citizens' protection. But those secrets also maintain power structure. Dylan Gould represents collaboration with oppressive power, and the film explores why people make that choice. He's not coerced through threats to his family or blackmail. He collaborates because he's calculated it's the winning move. His father did it, built wealth through it, and Dylan inherited both the fortune and the arrangement. It's privilege protecting itself through cooperation with whoever holds power, regardless of morality. That's uncomfortable because it's common, not just in science fiction, but throughout human history, wherever occupation or regime change occurs. The film connects this to class and economic anxiety in subtle ways. Sam can't find employment despite saving the world because his heroism isn't economically legible. He has no degree, no traditional career path, no way to translate extraordinary experience into conventional success. Meanwhile, Dylan prospers through collaboration with forces that threaten everyone, including Sam. There's a critique buried here about how systems reward complicity with power more than genuine heroism, how wealth insulates people from consequences of moral compromises. Sam's unemployment storyline touches on post-war veteran experiences without explicitly making that comparison. He's seen combat, experienced trauma, developed skills that have no civilian application, and now society expects him to just slot back into normal life like none of it happened. His contributions are classified, so he can't even discuss what he's done. It's the invisible veteran problem. People who sacrifice for society but can't talk about it, can't translate military experience into civilian value, and struggle with purposelessness when the mission ends. The film explores different forms of sacrifice and what makes them meaningful versus wasteful. Ironhide's death is waste. He dies because he trusted someone who didn't deserve trust. There's no glory in it, no meaningful trade. He's just murdered, and that senselessness is the point. Not all deaths in war are heroic sacrifices. Some are just losses, betrayals, mistakes. The film doesn't romanticize his death with a dramatic speech or meaningful last words. He dies confused and betrayed, which makes it tragic rather than noble. Contrast that with Optimus's willingness to sacrifice his relationship with Sentinel and eventually Sentinel himself. That's purposeful sacrifice, destroying something precious because keeping it would cost too much. When Optimus executes Megatron, he's sacrificing his own principle about mercy because maintaining that principle would enable future atrocities. These are active choices with clear reasoning even when they're painful. The film distinguishes between sacrifice that serves a purpose and death that serves nothing but cruelty. The space bridge technology functions as a metaphor for solutions that solve one problem while creating worse ones. It could save Cybertron by relocating it, but the relocation requires destroying another civilization. It's the ultimate zero-sum solution. One species' salvation is another's extinction. This maps onto real-world debates about resource allocation, immigration, climate refugees, and who has rights to habitable space when scarcity becomes extreme. The film doesn't have sophisticated answers, but it's asking the question. Chicago's destruction serves as visceral reminder that grand ideological conflicts have concrete costs measured in civilian lives. The film doesn't shy away from showing an American city getting leveled, people dying in the streets, infrastructure crumbling. These aren't abstract casualties in a distant war. It's Main Street USA getting demolished by forces that have nothing to do with humanity but everything to do with humanity's future. There's a helplessness in that which resonates with post-9/11 American anxiety about being attacked for reasons unrelated to anything you've done. The Autobots being exiled explores xenophobia and scapegoating. When things go wrong, the easiest political move is to blame the outsiders, the refugees, the ones who are different. Never mind that the Autobots have been defending Earth. They brought the war here, so they need to leave. It's the logic of every nativist movement. Foreigners cause problems, and removal solves them. The film demonstrates how that logic fails catastrophically, because the actual problem wasn't the Autobots' presence, but the Decepticons' hostility, which continues regardless. Carly's manipulation of Megatron touches on psychological warfare and ego as exploitable weakness. Power doesn't make you immune to insecurity. Sometimes it amplifies it because you're constantly afraid of losing status. Megatron's been the Decepticon leader for millions of years, and that identity is so core to him that being demoted is worse than death. Carly exploits that, using words as weapons more effectively than any human gun could. It's a reminder that even in wars between giant robots, psychology matters. The mentor-student betrayal carries implications about how values transmission fails. Optimus learned, freedom is the right of all sentient beings from Sentinel, or so he thought. But maybe Sentinel never believed it universally. Maybe it only ever applied to Cybertronians, and Optimus extended it to all species on his own. That gap between what teachers say and what students hear, between stated values and practiced ones, destroys the relationship when it finally becomes visible. How many other values might be provisional rather than absolute, but are taught as universal? The film engages with American exceptionalism through its lens on the moon landing. That quintessentially American achievement gets reframed as accidental intersection with alien conflict, suggesting that national triumphs might be less about inherent superiority and more about circumstantial luck. The space race wasn't won through American ingenuity alone. It was influenced by alien technology crashes and Cold War desperation. That deflates the mythological aspect while still acknowledging the achievement, a more complicated view of national pride. Faith in institutions gets thoroughly interrogated. The government hid the Ark for 50 years. Annie Est, despite good intentions, can't overcome bureaucratic paralysis when faced with existential threat. The military has all the weapons and none of the capability to use them effectively. Meering represents well-meaning institutional actors who still make catastrophically wrong decisions because institutions optimize for political survival rather than optimal outcomes. It's cynical but not entirely unfair as critique. The price of leadership is another thread running through the film. Optimus carries the weight of every Autobot who dies under his command. Sentinel carries the burden of watching Cybertron fall despite his best effort. Megatron carries the erosion of his authority and the recognition that his leadership led the Decepticons to defeat. Each leader pays differently, but they all pay. The film suggests leadership in wartime is inherently tragic. You're guaranteed to fail someone, lose people who trusted you, make choices that haunt you forever. Ultimately, Dark of the Moon argues that freedom without security is impossible, but security without freedom isn't worth having. It's a tension without clean resolution, which is probably more honest than providing easy answers. The film ends with victory but not triumph. Earth is saved but scarred. The Autobots can stay but have lost friends. Peace is achieved through violence that contradicts peaceful principles. That ambivalence feels appropriate for a story about war, where victories are always partial and costs are always steep. Dark of the Moon opened on June 29, 2011, and demolished the box office with the kind of numbers that Hollywood executives dream about. It earned $97.9 million on its opening day in North America alone, setting records for a Wednesday release. By the end of its first 5 days, it had accumulated $81.1 million domestically. The film went on to gross $305.4 million in the United States and a staggering $771 million internationally, bringing its worldwide total to $1.123 billion. That made it the second highest grossing film of 2011, trailing only Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Those numbers validated Paramount's decision to bring Michael Bay back after the critical drubbing Revenge of the Fallen received. They also demonstrated that audiences still had appetite for big, dumb, spectacular robot battles when executed with technical craftsmanship and at least some narrative coherence. The 3D premium pricing certainly helped. Tickets cost more, which inflated gross revenues. But people don't show up repeatedly if the experience disappoints. Dark of the Moon had legs, playing in theaters throughout the summer and into fall. Critical reception landed in that interesting space where reviewers acknowledged the film's craftsmanship while remaining ambivalent about its worth. Roger Ebert gave it 3 out of 4 stars, praising the technical achievement while noting it was a visually ugly film with an incoherent plot, wooden characters, and inane dialogue. That pretty much captured the consensus: impressive spectacle wrapped around questionable storytelling choices. Rotten Tomatoes aggregated a 35% critic score, but an 82% audience score. That gap revealing the divide between what film critics value versus what general audiences want from a summer blockbuster. The technical achievements received more unequivocal praise. The Visual Effects Society nominated the film for Outstanding Visual Effects in a Visual Effects-Driven Feature, Motion Picture. While it didn't win, that year belonged to Rise of the Planet of the Apes. The nomination recognized ILM's work creating photorealistic transformers and integrating them into practical environments. The sound design teams received similar recognition, with nominations for various technical awards acknowledging the sonic landscape they constructed. Dark of the Moon's release positioned it at a specific moment in blockbuster evolution. This was post-Avatar, when 3D was still considered the future of cinema, rather than a gimmick that would largely fade away within a few years. The film demonstrated that 3D could enhance action comprehension rather than just providing cheap things flying at your face moments. Directors like James Cameron pointed to Dark of the Moon as an example of native 3D done properly, using depth to clarify spatial relationships during complex sequences. The film's success gave the Transformers franchise legitimacy as one of Hollywood's reliable billion-dollar properties. After Dark of the Moon, Paramount greenlit Age of Extinction with confidence that audiences would show up regardless of critical opinion. That installment would go on to make even more money internationally, particularly in China, demonstrating that the franchise had global appeal that transcended American nostalgia for 1980s toys. Within Michael Bay's filmography, Dark of the Moon represents something of a peak, the moment where his maximalist aesthetic and Hollywood's budget tolerance aligned perfectly. Paramount gave him $195 million and essentially said, "Go make the biggest robot battle ever filmed," and Bay delivered exactly that. The Chicago destruction sequence became a benchmark that later Bay films and other directors' blockbusters would reference when planning large-scale urban destruction. The film influenced how Hollywood approached blockbuster third acts. That extended Chicago battle, nearly 45 minutes of sustained action with brief character moments interspersed, became a template that films like Avengers, Endgame, and Zack Snyder's Justice League would later refine. The idea that you could hold an audience through an exceptionally long climax if you varied the type of action and included emotional stakes became accepted wisdom in blockbuster construction. Culturally, Dark of the Moon is remembered primarily for its technical spectacle rather than its narrative or characters. People recall specific images: the building collapse, the wingsuit sequence, Cybertron hanging in Earth's sky, Optimus executing Sentinel. These moments entered the collective visual vocabulary of 2010's blockbuster cinema. Film students and aspiring directors studied how Bay constructed those sequences, even if they disagreed with his aesthetic choices. The film also represents a specific type of blockbuster that's become increasingly rare: the non-franchise universe standalone sequel. It continues a story from previous films but doesn't spend runtime setting up future installments or connecting to other properties. It tells one story, resolves it, and ends. That self-contained approach feels almost quaint in an era of interconnected cinematic universes, where every film is a piece of a larger puzzle. For the Transformers franchise specifically, Dark of the Moon closed out what fans often call the original trilogy, the 3 films centered on Sam Witwicky and the initial Autobot Decepticon conflict on Earth. Future films would reboot or continue with different human characters and new conflicts, but these first three movies had narrative cohesion despite their individual quality variations. Dark of the Moon gave that arc an ending, something many franchises never bothered to provide. The film's approach to blending historical events with science fiction influenced other projects. X-Men, First Class, released the same summer, used a similar technique of integrating superheroes into Cold War history. Later films like Hidden Figures and First Man would depict the space race from more grounded perspectives, but they were engaging with the same historical moment that Dark of the Moon had used as its launching point. The moon landing became fair game for fictional reinterpretation in ways it hadn't been before. 15 years later, Dark of the Moon endures as a fascinating artifact of a specific moment in blockbuster filmmaking, when studios were willing to give auteur directors, even controversial ones like Bay, massive budgets and creative freedom to deliver spectacle. It's not a perfect film by any measure. It's too long, tonally inconsistent, and occasionally incoherent in its plotting, but it achieves what it sets out to achieve, an experience of overwhelming scale and technical virtuosity that justifies theatrical viewing. Perhaps that's the most significant legacy. In an era where streaming has made staying home increasingly attractive, Dark of the Moon represents the argument for theaters, a film that loses essential impact when reduced to a television screen. Those Chicago battle sequences were designed for IMAX 3D screens, and watching them any other way is experiencing a diminished version. As theaters continue evolving their role in film distribution, Dark of the Moon stands as evidence that spectacle still matters, that some stories demand the biggest canvas available to tell properly. The Transformers franchise continues, sometimes well and sometimes poorly, but this third entry remains the one that balanced Bay's maximalist instincts with just enough narrative structure to keep audiences emotionally invested through the chaos. Not a masterpiece, just a really, really big robot movie that understood exactly what it wanted to be and executed that vision without compromise or apology.